Hi. Hi. In, 2018, my wife and I stood up on this stage at Main Event, and students like you gave $18,000 to get us to New York. Students. Sacrificial. Thank you. Freshman me needs it. New master, what he's doing, those students need to know that they're not afterthoughts. Sacrificial. What a beautiful, beautiful picture. I did not expect that. That's beautiful. Yeah. Tonight we're going to open on a scene. I want you to imagine this scene. Imagine you're Peter, and you're standing in front of 70 people. You're standing in front of 70 people, and these 70 people are the most impressive people in society. They are the ones who set the laws. They are the ones who have all the power and privilege. They determine what society cares about. And you are standing in front of them because you are on trial in front of them for healing a crippled man at the wrong time. I don't get it either. It's you and a middle schooler. That's your backup. In front of 70 people. 2 versus 70. Most intimidating group you've ever seen. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine the people that you resent because of their power and privilege staring at you? The status and success you envy? The people that you've wanted to be like or have their power? See, if you're Peter, you've been asking your whole life, am I good enough? You have been asking your whole life, am I good enough? This is the question of shame. This is shame's question. Peter has shame. He was motivated by shame. I'll explain a little bit more about Peter, but before we get there, let's talk about shame. Shame is not guilt. Guilt says, have I done enough? Shame says, am I enough? Guilt declares you'll never outweigh. Shame says you'll never outrun. Who you really are will be outed. Shame is the great saboteur. It gets underneath your dreams and supplants it with a twisted vision. Shame is doubt on steroids. We've talked about doubt. Shame is a parasite of the mind. It actually is a parasite of the mind, and psychologists have studied this. Shame is this awful parasite that hijacks every emotion in your mind and makes it its servant. It makes you question hope, joy, anger, peace, whatever emotion, and says, do you actually deserve that? Shame actually keeps your brain, your right and your left brain, from talking to itself. Shame can keep you from seeing logical perspective with a simple question. Am I enough? Shame tells you you are just too broken. You'll never belong. If people knew who you were, you'll never belong. Really. Peter was a man motivated by shame. And here he is in front of the people that society would say gets to determine the answer to this question. Can you imagine? This is the litmus test. In front of the people with all the power staring at you while you are wondering, am I good enough? And now you're about to find out. And this is what they say about you. Acts 4:13. When they saw the boldness of Peter and John, and they perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished. And they had recognized that they had been with Jesus. They perceived that they were uneducated and common. Translation, you are not enough. You don't belong here with us. Your shame was right. Can you imagine? That test? I've always been shocked by this verse. What it would be like to hear that. But Peter was sitting on a secret. You see, they were astonished because he had been with Jesus. Had been. Last night, we talked about God's authority and how the therefore in the Great Commission is built off of God's authority. We saw that we need to believe in and submit to God's authority, to go on this great mission, and we saw that Jesus earned all this authority. He did. He earned it. It's his, and then he says, go therefore. And when we think about that authority and when we understand it intellectually and we see it, that should be enough. That should be enough to say, okay, I'll go. But here's the problem. Shame exists. And it sabotages this vision. Shame is the great saboteur of the Great Commission because it gets underneath you and it says, most people can make disciples, but you? Really you? Do you belong in this mission, in this vision? Do you even belong in the kingdom of God? Do you even belong in God's family? I'm not sure I'm enough. Maybe I'm just too broken. Jesus knew their shame. And he had an answer for it. Last night we said that what he said at the beginning was the boldest claim anyone's ever given. Tonight it's the most extravagant promise anybody's ever given. I will be with you always to the end of the age. I will be with you always to the end of the age. Always. What would it be like if we lived that this verse was real? Always. Every place. Tonight, I'm going to bring you on a journey of shame. On Peter's journey with shame and mine. On whether or not we really believe Jesus at his word. I was taught when you teach, you should do one point and one passage. So I've got like 5, or both, because Jesus has been teaching me a lot. And I think you all are struggling with shame so badly in a world where you have to continue to put up the best front. Shame is this generation's great battle. Thank God he's brought me into this journey of shame, that I could share it with you. And it will be a journey. We'll start with Peter on a boat, and we'll end with Peter having breakfast. Jesus is here again tonight. Abba is here again tonight. The Spirit is here again tonight. He's not still waiting out there. He's here. And he wants to go to the very end of your doubt and outlast it and meet you here. Buckle up, doubters. We're not done yet. Jesus Abba, Spirit, you are here. Speak to us. May my testimony and Peter's testimony be nothing but praise and worship to your pursuit. In your name, amen. We're going to start with the beginning of shame usually starts with a call. The call. The big call. I all capsed it. I think I all capsed everything, though, so. I'm going to start with my call, my background, a little bit more about me, where shame began for me. You see, I am the only child of John and Lori Parsons, incredible people of faith. And my mom had a brain tumor that they tried to remove 3 times. And in the course of doing so, they killed a few things in her brain and her pituitary gland, and a whole host of other problems happened. And so I was not supposed to be born. Medically, scientifically, they still don't understand. From an early age, I was told not just your birth was miraculous, but you are a miracle. You are a miracle. And early on, I was wondering, am I really? And then something terrible but wonderful happened. My dad decided to go on this incredible journey of faith where he dropped being a lawyer and started a school for at-risk teenagers in Omaha, Nebraska. A Christian school where he led a lot of people to Christ and was a father to a lot of people. And from an early age, I got asked, I think the first time I might have been 8 or 9, you going to take up the family business? I don't remember the first time I asked it, but I remember when it became a habit in middle school of asking, am I worth the miracle? Can I fill those shoes? I had anger problems. I was frustrated all the time with being second in everything because I had to be the best to be worth being the miracle. And I had to make an impact on this world, or else I was a waste of a miracle. This great vision that could have been inspiring, that I could have gone with Jesus on, became this incredible burden. Luke 5, 1 through 11. This is Peter's beginning. This is his call. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, Jesus, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. He saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, Peter's, he asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let your nets out for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." "O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. Peter and James and John and Andrew had spent all night fishing. All night. Caught nothing. That's got to be a little bit shameful for a fisherman. Like the main thing you do is catch fish. And they're going through the tedious process. They were closing down shop and they were on shore and they were picking stuff out of their nets. We don't think about having to do this, but they actually had to like pull out barnacles or I don't know whatever's in the lakes and pull it off so that they could catch more fish. And Jesus, and you can imagine the exhaustion, right? Coming off a long shift of work. And Jesus shows up and he's like, "I'm going to use your boat for a sermon. Look, I would like to go home, please. So they let Jesus do it, and then Jesus pays them for their time and says, hey, why don't you toss it over the side? And they catch way too many fish, so much so they had to get another boat. I can't imagine how fast James and John paddled. They took in more fish than they possibly could have needed. I mean, this was a big haul. This could have provided for them for a long time. And Peter's looking at this fish. He's looking at this catch, and Jesus says to him, from now on, you will be catching men. And you can feel, when you think about the reality of that situation, Peter already some people mentioned this morning, already start to weigh the potential of his life and weighing the efficiency of his impact. Am I going to catch enough? Am I ever going to catch enough like this? Shame gets a hold of this of the desire of accomplishment. And it starts with this simple enough phrase, I will be good enough if I accomplish this. For me, I will be good enough if I lead enough people to Christ. I will be worthy of the miracle if my impact for Christ is big enough. If I live up to my Father's name in more, I will not have wasted a miracle. It tells you to prove yourself by a great mission. That also could be the Great Commission. I will be enough, I will be good enough if I lead this many people to Christ, if I disciple this many people. If I can see this many generations from my life, I will be good enough. And so we see that Peter's pursuit has begun, the never-ending, inexhaustible pursuit of good enough. Pursuing good enough. And on this pursuit, Peter meets a lot of tests. He's going to meet a lot of tests as he pursues this. But we're only going to look at one in depth. I'll mention a couple more. Tests that reveal whether or not you're good enough. Because when you pursue good enough, in actuality, everything you do is a test. And you're only as good as your last test. When you pursue good enough, you're only as good as your last performance. Let's look at the first. Matthew 14, 22 through 33. Immediately, this is after Jesus had fed the 5,000. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. In another version of the story, he actually was trying to beat them across the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. That's probably what we all would do. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Let me pause for a second. Have you ever taken on a foe that's way too big for you to prove yourself? I have. A lot. There's a story that gets a lot of play that's actually kind of funny, but it's a little medically disgusting. But I'm gonna tell it to you. I'm not just gonna say that and be like, yeah, just come to me after. But behind it was my shame. So this story kind of describes Jared Parsons in a nutshell. I'm asthmatic. I am this tall. This is not an illusion. I'm this tall. I'm allergic to grass. So naturally, and you know, I weigh like a feather. So naturally, I played football. Yeah, I had played football. I say it's because, I went to a small school, and when you go to a small school, they just need like bodies on the field, just get out there, But in actuality, I did it because I wanted to prove myself. And I had a hard time proving myself in football, as you could imagine. Usually when I got hit, I usually went airborne. And I usually landed in grass, and then my allergy to grass and my asthma, it was a huge cycle of just bruising and sneezing and wheezing. It was awesome. But my senior year, I finally got a chance to prove myself. I had finally gained enough weight so that my pads didn't burden me too much. And I started playing receiver. And I played, this is really gonna show I don't know how many of you know what this is, 8-man football. I played 8-man football, and so wide receiver usually is, it's kind of a waste of a position. It's because in 8-man football, you don't have enough people to block. You need everyone to block. The field is smaller, and so you don't even have enough time to pass. Usually the quarterback's on the ground by the time he throws it. But I got to play receiver. But we were playing a team. Here it is. Here's my time to shine. Here's my time to prove myself. We were playing a team that was really big, but pretty slow. Well, I'm small and quick. Maybe we have the answer. Maybe it's finally time to pass it to Jared and not just have him be like a decoy. So, game starts, and one more piece. This is the most important information. So not only were they big, in general, they had two really, really big linebackers. Okay, and then that's the people in the middle. Two really, really big linebackers, and way too big to be playing that position, in my opinion. I'm not shaming them, but they were gigantic. They were they're supposed to be chasing people 260, 280 pounds. I mean, they're giant guys. And my job, because of how they play defense, they would snap the ball, they threw it to me, and I was not to go anywhere but straight for the sideline. Run away from all of the big to safety. Okay? Run to safety. First play, get the ball, 8 yards. Yes! 8 more than I've got all season. It's an 800% increase in yards. Second play, first down. Third play, first down again. They didn't cover it. Oh, yeah. And by this time, the two, behemoths in the middle were starting to get mad. And on my way back to the huddle, one of them, I don't remember which one, says to me, "Yeah, you keep running, you little boop." That was it. That's what I needed to hear. Now, in football, when you make contact, you are taught how to tackle in a specific form, okay? How you're supposed to tackle is don't lead with your head. That's really bad right now. It's bad. It's always been bad. Concussions are very bad. There's new people caring about concussions. But you're taught when you do this is to lower your pad level as low as you possibly can get. I'm already pretty low. I've got a pretty good shot. And I'm thinking, big guys, I might be able to get underneath, maybe at their knees or their thighs, when I catch the next pass. And I got it. It's not going to go the way you're thinking. And I got it. I got the call. I got the pass. And I looked him dead in the eye. Now, my coach, he's got a flair of the dramatic, and he says that I looked at him first. He says that I caught it, looked at him, I'm not doing the plan. And then I ran straight at the behemoth. He was so surprised by my vigor that he, instead of lowering, he kind of did this maneuver. and he hopped on my back while my leg was locked. That's where I get you. Knees, knees have the one way they're supposed to bend. I think you guys figured it out. Nope. I do not have pictures. Apparently, the other thing my coach says that on my way to the ground, I screamed out, "Who tackles like that?" I did not expect him to change form. Later on, I was asked, "Why did you do it?" Well, I was on crutches, by the way. That was the end of my season. I don't know if that was clear. That's the end of my football career, actually. I was on crutches. I was asked, "Why did you do it?" And I said I couldn't stand anyone thinking I was scared. Shame. Peter, in this passage, decides to take on a foe way too big for himself. Let's pick it back up. Peter answered Jesus, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." I think the good people that title like the sections in the Bible got this one wrong. Peter walked on water. Peter did. Not that it's like insignificant that Jesus did, but a total normal dude got out of the boat during a storm. It's not like he got out and the water was level. He got out while the waves were crashing up and down. The walk to Jesus was probably a little bit like this. It wasn't straightforward. Why did Peter do it? And why did he get scared? Whenever I read this story, "Oh, you of little faith," it hurts me inside because, oh my gosh, I would hate to be called not brave enough. We'll find out later that that's not about how much, but where his faith was. But he saw the wind. He had so much confidence at the beginning in God, but he started to believe that he had to prove himself. And when he saw the wind and waves, he realized he could not prove himself. And that's why he sunk. He wasn't brave enough. Maybe it's not brave for you when you read that story. Maybe it's a different word. Peter had a few other tests, a few other words that I'll quickly hit. In Matthew 16, he correctly identifies Jesus as the anointed one. Says you're the Christ. But then right after, he incorrectly corrects Jesus on the nature of Jesus' anointing. And Jesus rebukes Satan in him. Whenever I read that passage, I wonder, what am I missing? If I'm Peter, what did I miss? Am I smart enough? Am I wise enough? Am I faithful enough? He just called me Satan. After the transfiguration, when they left the mountain, he and the rest of the 12 got into an argument about who was the greatest, and Jesus rebuked them again. Shame loves competition. Loves it. Says, prove you belong by winning and defeating those around you, and uses other people as a litmus test for you not being good enough. Shame had a hold of the 12. Am I enough? Am I enough? Am I good enough? And there's all the tests that you go through, brave enough, smart enough, whatever enough. That's how I'm good enough begins to evolve and take shape and form identities in your life. Am I blank enough? Or in statement form, I'm not brave enough. That's what I was terrified of hearing. You're not brave enough, therefore you're not worthy. You're not smart enough, therefore you're not worthy. That competition thing hits me pretty hard. I was always second best. There's some of you, you're like, that sounds awesome. But at a small school, I never, ever took the podium. This close. This close. But that doesn't mean I'm worthy. I'm not smart enough, brave enough, faithful enough, reliable enough, responsible enough, tough enough. When you walked in, you were handed a card. I'd love for you to take that card out right now for a moment and write down your shame. What is this statement or statements for you? Where do you not feel enough? Write it out. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to write it out. You write it out. These are the things that you pursue in order to prove that you're good enough. Out of the tests come these identities to prove that you can accomplish the mission and prove that you're good enough, that you're worthy, you belong. And this leads us to making promises we cannot keep. We start to make vows. We start to make vows that we cannot keep. The vows we make that we cannot keep. The night before Jesus was crucified, he decides to have a dinner with his closest friends. He opens the dinner by washing their feet, humbly submitting, washing dirt, grime, unmentionable things off their feet. God. They have a dinner together. At the close of dinner, Jesus introduces this idea to the 12 that one of you will betray me. The 12 knew it, and Peter knew it. One of them has been addressed as being influenced by Satan. It wasn't Judas. Peter. Peter's getting a little nervous. Surely he can't mean me. And Jesus says something terrifying. I'm going to go somewhere that you can't go. Peter's getting anxious. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this mission off. Does Jesus think I'm going to betray him? I have to prove that whatever it takes, I have to prove that I'm good enough. Peter makes a vow. John 13, 36 to 38. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay my life down for you. I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Peter had to make this vow. His pursuit of good enough over the last 3 years had led him to this, and it was all on the line. We think we make these vows to fight our shame, but it is shame that feeds us these vows. These vows that say, you can never do this again, you will never be this again, I must not be an angry man. I have to be a good father. I have to be worthy of John Parsons' name. I have to be good enough for this scholarship. I have to prove that my parents' work was enough. I cannot waste the life I have given, and I will not waste my life. I will prove myself. I will be a good man or woman. These vows are built off of your character, and they are shame's trap. This is very evident in my testimony and my battle with pornography. I was introduced to pornography at an early age, and I knew it was wrong. And I became addicted to it because I didn't know what to do with my anger or the sense of inadequacy. Shame tends to grow your addictions and feed them, and then feed you with the vow to get out of it, to keep you in this cycle. So I made the same vow probably every day for 10 years. I will never look at porn again. For you, God, I will never look at it again. That vow and that shame pushed me into ministry. Because I thought if I did enough ministry, I could maybe someday prove that I am not just a porn addict. And I'm not just an angry man, but I'm worth the miracle. I'm worthy. I tried to outweigh my shame. But the problem is that had no power in defeating my addiction. And so I hid it. For 3 years on staff with the Navigators, I hid my addiction to pornography. 3 years of marriage. I had to keep pursuing good enough, but I had to hide my shame. I was stuck. You might note that I said it was around year 3 that I began to believe that disciple making would work. Fleer this morning was truly right when he said that you catch the beauty of disciple making and life change. Because in year 3, I finally shared my shame. Thank you, God, for John Payton. And that was the year where I looked at Peter's shame and started this journey because I identified with this vow. I will not fail you, Jesus. I'm good enough. I will be good enough. I have to be good enough. I have to prove myself, or else my shame is right, and I am not enough, and I don't belong. Fast forward. Later that night, Jesus was arrested by Judas. Unfortunately, I wish I'd covered this next part. Simon cut off a guy's ear, and Jesus put it back on his head. Yep, and then Jesus was led away. Peter had tried to prove himself with physical force. But here's where the terror really begins. Jesus was led away and put on trial in front of that group of 70 that we mentioned earlier. He's being humiliated and put on trial for crimes he did not commit, while his friends sat and watched and said nothing. Let me read the story to you, Luke 22, 54 through 62. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance, and when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man was also with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And a little later, someone else saw him and said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." Man, I am not. We need to read inflection into this. It's not just words. He's a real person. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, "Certainly this man was also with him, for he too is a Galilean." And that last person, by the way, was the cousin of the dude's ear he cut off. And Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, at his greatest failure, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord and how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Why did Peter deny? Looking at the people he so badly wanted to impress to prove himself, shame got a hold of him. And can you imagine the end of your pursuit, at your greatest failure, your most embarrassing, shameful sin? Jesus looks at you. I want to note something here. We don't know what Jesus' face looked like. I don't think it looks how you think it looks. I don't think it was disapproval. But he went out and wept bitterly. Shamed seemed to have won. It sent Peter on a mission. It proved he wasn't enough. So Peter hid. While Peter was hiding, Jesus was humiliated and killed. He died for sins he did not commit. Satan, in sin and death, attempting to put him to shame and his Father to shame, saying, "See, they weren't worth it. They weren't worth it. They killed you for no reason. No one's good enough." Jesus outlasted shame's attempt. And he walked out of the tomb, and he shamed shame. Meanwhile, Peter laid low for a while. Jesus had some great conversations with some of his friends. Peter, all the while wondering, is he ever going to talk to me again? After what I've done. Then Peter decides, I'm going to go fishing. And Jesus found him. Fishing. Again. While he was fishing, a little while off, or a little ways off the land, Jesus found them on the land, and he calls out to them. And Peter, I love this, this is so beautiful, in a moment where he doesn't care about shame, takes off his robe, something a man should never do, and swam to Jesus. And John even notes that he didn't need to do that. The boat was pretty close to land. But he couldn't wait any longer. He had to know what Jesus thought of him. He had to know the answer to the question, am I good enough? And then they had this conversation. After breakfast, John 20, 15 through 17, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he had said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Jesus then goes on to confirm for Peter that he would someday lay down his life for Jesus. Why did Jesus do it this way? Why did he ask him the 3 times? This seems cruel on the outside, but what Jesus was doing was he was forcing Peter to face his shame. Shame grows in the darkness, and it doesn't want you to name it. It wants you to keep it hidden. But Jesus made Peter face his shame. You denied me 3 times. I know that. But I'm not asking, and I'm not wondering, are you good enough? All I've ever wanted to know is, do you love me? Jesus knew the answer. He was setting Peter up for redemption. Showing Peter that all the while he had been pursuing good enough, Jesus was pursuing him. This isn't a story of Peter finding his own good enough. This is a story about Jesus showing up at that first boat and saying, that one, Peter, I'm pursuing him. And I'm going to show him that I love him. And I'm going to let him say it to me. Jesus took his pursuit of shame and redeemed it into the mission of Jesus, that he would shame in Peter. You see, Peter had actually found good enough. It wasn't in himself. When I realize, while I'm reading this passage, I weep. I am Peter. Jesus had never asked me to be worthy of the miracle. Abba had never told me, prove yourself worthy. He never said that. He was pursuing me my whole life. He knows the ways in which I was broken, and he used that brokenness to draw me to himself. I started to see and understand that Jesus was in every room of success rejoicing with me. And when I was failing in sin, he didn't leave the room because I was so unworthy. He was right there beckoning me into something better, into a better identity. Don't go there. I've got something better for you. But I'm not leaving. Jesus said he will be with us wherever we go. He meant it. Where I will be with you always. He's talking to your shame. To every moment that you've never felt good enough, he's saying, I don't care, I'm there. Last night we talked about Jesus' authority, that all authority had been given to him. I want to highlight that a little bit more and give a Jared Parsons paraphrase. We looked at last night that Jesus won all authority by submitting himself to the Father. Remember, this is the Father's plan. Abba said, I want my kids back. And Jesus said, okay, hold on to my crown. I'll go get them. I'll go get them. And he came to earth, and he bled, and he sweated, and he cried, and he grieved, and he suffered death on a cross, and he went to hell. He went to hell and back. He literally went to hell and back. And on the way out the empty tomb, he grabbed his crown again from his dad and said, let's bring him home. And said, I will always be with you. And then he gathers the doubters. He gathers Peter and James and John. He gathers you and me. And he looks at us. He looks at you in the eye. And he looks at sin and Satan and shame and death. And he looks at all of you and he says, this one's mine. And it's not up for discussion. That's what he did with his authority. He said to your shame, enough. I am enough, and therefore you are enough. I'm not leaving. He declared it, this one's mine. And I think about Peter hearing this on that mountain. And that question of, am I enough? The answer is, he is. And therefore I am. I can't out-pursue Jesus. He will outlast me. You are not alone. Jesus declared you belong. You are not too broken. You are loved. You have nothing left to prove. Friends, surrender to Jesus' pursuit. Give up and let him love you. He has run you down saying, I have been there the entire time and I will be with you wherever you go. Some of you are wondering why you are here or why you are still trying. You are trying because the King, who has all authority, hasn't stopped pursuing you. When we talk about discipleship, making disciples, this is the power of disciple making. The only freedom we have found is living vulnerably, openly, sharing and showing that Jesus is enough for me. This promise fundamentally changed the 12, the 11. This is what changed the world. You see, Peter's secret before the 70 wasn't that he had just been with Jesus, but he was with him still. I always have Jesus. He's not embarrassed of me. He's not asking me to be good enough. He just wants to know if we love him. He's pursuing you. This will change the world. You let go of your shame, this will change the world. The world is living out of their shame. Everyone is living out of their shame. trying to prove that they're good enough. Jesus says, this one's mine. I'd like for you to take your cards back out again. And we're going to move into a time of reflection and prayer with each other. I want you to take out your cards and look at them. Look at the things that you've been pursuing to prove that you're not too broken. And then I want you to imagine that Jesus is here and he's looking at the card with you. And what he's saying about the card. I want you to invite him to talk to you about that card. The last piece that I want you to do is I want you to bring your shame into the light. Shame grows in the dark. My third year of staff, I was planning Main Event Conference. I was still addicted to pornography. And it finally boiled over. And I told John, I told him, expecting him to say, I'm going to take the conference away from you. I'm going to take you off staff. At best, maybe some sort of healing sabbatical or something. Fully prepared to being fired. And when I said to John, I'm addicted to pornography, John stood up and walked across the room and held me. We get to be extensions of God's love and pursuit to each other. So this last piece, I want you to bring your shame into the light. It'd be easy to hold on to it and not be vulnerable. But there are people in this room that you trust. And I want you to take that card to them and pray with them. It might be scary. The space might be tight. Jesus is with you, though, and he wants to meet you. John always thanked me for that moment because he got to see grace in a new way, too. We get to be extensions of grace to each other. To speak to each other better identities. Not just affirm a skill or a talent, but to say to someone, you know, you're not these things, right? You're God's daughter. Or you're enough. My shame still exists, my friends. It does. It has flare-ups. But it's fighting a losing battle, and it knows it. Because I know the truth, that he will be with me always. What if we live like we believe that? I'm going to kick off our reflection time. A pretty simple prayer. And some space. And during this time, as you bring them to Jesus, I'd encourage you to start, to whenever you're ready, find the person you trust. Move around the room. You have permission to move around. And let's see God do a mighty work in shaming shame tonight. Jesus, you are here. Abba, you are here. Spirit, you are here in us. And you have something to say to us. I believe that. Would you reveal to us your goodness and speak to us about our shame? We bring our shame to you now, Jesus.